Welcome back to Combat Mission A Battle for Normandy for the 7th mission of the Road to Montebourg campaign. In the last mission, Dog and Easy companies of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment smashed the German position on Highway N13 at the farm of Labrynth. Now we're punching the flank of the Germans on the highway with Fox Company from 2nd Battalion 8th Infantry. We have three objectives here. Along with the standard take the objective and destroy the enemy, we also have to find and destroy a German forward observer team that is calling in accurate fire on St Mere Eglise. That's not a task I'm going to worry too much about. Chances are I'll mop up the FO team as I'm clearing out the ground objective at the back of the map. The map itself is about 1,100 metres by 550 metres, and I'm fighting up the length of it, so we have a long and narrow map to contend with. The ground slopes up towards the enemy side of the map, and to the surprise of absolutely nobody, is split into fields by plenty of thick bocage. There is a road that runs in an L shape along the bottom and up the left side of the map, but I'm not interested in going out of my way to use an obvious route when I can blast my way through the hedgerows and go directly at the enemy. That's the plan in a nutshell. Nothing fancy. I'm going to attack in a straight line from my deployment zone to the objective area and smash anything that gets in my way. According to the briefing, the enemy force has been in action throughout the day and is possibly less than the advertised reinforced company, though it may well be backed up by assault guns and tanks. In the grander scheme of things, I'm not likely to be facing more than a single German battalion, which would probably have only 3 companies. I've only met 2 of them so far in this section of the campaign. The force of Labrynth is obviously out of the picture, having surrendered, and the force which was blocked by Lieutenant Turnbull, which, coincidentally, was a reinforced company backed up by tanks and assault guns, was severely mauled. So if I'm guesstimating this right, I'm either up against a company I haven't encountered yet, or the enemy is the depleted force from Turnbull's stand. But I can't just assume that I've got a mangled understrength enemy force to deal with. That's a recipe for disaster. I do have a pretty substantial force of my own though. We met Fox Company, 2nd Battalion 8th Infantry and the 2nd Battalion Engineer Platoon in Part 1, and since then they've been resupplied and brought back up to strength. I also have a 2nd Platoon B Troop from the 4th Cavalry Squadron with me for this mission, so we've got some new toys to play with. While the armoured divisions have taken over cavalry's traditional shock role, the actual American cavalry units are more concerned with reconnaissance. These are the units probing ahead of the main force, locating the enemy, determining his strength, and then reporting back. As such, they're made up of light, fast vehicles. The platoon has 2 recon sections, each of which consists of an M8 Greyhound armoured scout car leading a Willis Jeep mounting a 30 caliber machine gun. I am a fan of the Greyhound, especially in the multiplayer. It's quick, it has a low profile, and with the open-topped turret it has excellent spotting abilities. In terms of firepower, the 37mm gun is certainly a little bit underwhelming when compared to larger caliber weapons or automatic cannon, but like with the 57mm AT gun we looked at in Turnbull's stand, a smaller caliber translates into a higher rate of fire and a large ammunition capacity. The Greyhound carries 80 rounds of 37mm, 40 high explosive rounds, 27 armor-piercing rounds, and 8 rounds of everybody's favourite canister. The M8s in the recon sections are the early model, which only has a 30 caliber coaxial machine gun with 500 rounds backing up the main gun. Clearly, the Greyhound doesn't want to be tangling with enemy tanks unless it can engage them from the sides or rear at point-blank range, but it's easily capable of dealing with light vehicles, half-tracks, and infantry. It's mostly bulletproof, but it's designed around speed, not protection, so it's going to have issues with anything larger than small arms fired at it anywhere except its frontal arc. Obviously, being open-topped, the turret has no roof, so the crew is vulnerable to enemy plunging fire, mortar bombs, artillery shells, or hand grenades that get popped in. The jeeps in the recon sections are literally just jeeps with machine guns mounted on the back. Very fast, especially on road, but because of that speed they have no protection whatsoever, and a gunner who, in game at least, is incapable of ducking down to make himself a smaller target. These jeeps aren't totally useless, but it's difficult to see how they're going to perform their scouting role in this kind of closed up terrain without resorting to pattern style drive down that road until you get blown up reconnaissance. Leading the cavalry platoon is another M8 Greyhound with a HQ in it. This time it's the mid-war model, which has had a 50 caliber machine gun mounted on the top of the turret to give it some extra punch. This HQ vehicle is backed up by another MG Jeep and a pair of M8 howitzer motor carriages. The HMC is a Stuart light tank modified to mount a short-barreled 75mm howitzer in the turret. To fit this in, the turret now has no roof, leaving the crew vulnerable to fire from above like the Greyhound crew, and there is no coaxial machine gun. There is at least a 50 caliber MG, so the HMC isn't entirely reliant on its main gun, but the vehicle is all about the 75mm. The HMC concept is essentially that of self-propelled artillery. You mount an artillery piece on an armoured vehicle so that you can bring some heavier firepower up to the front line and engage targets directly. So if the recon sections find some enemy troops holed up in a building or in a bunker, the HMC rolls up and blasts it so that the recon sections can get on with doing recon things. As such, the HMC predominantly carries high explosive ammunition, 38 rounds. It's there to engage enemy infantry and strong points, not enemy armour. Given that it's not impossible that a HMC might encounter enemy tanks, it does carry 4 high explosive anti-tank rounds, which give it some degree of anti-tank capability through the shaped charge warhead, but not one that I would consider in any way reliable. It also carries 4 smoke rounds. Obviously it's nice to have some backup for the infantry here, but this doesn't feel like the kind of map that's going to let the cavalry shine. The only real opportunity they have to zoom off and recon things is the road, which I've already ruled out as too risky, and they're a lot more likely to be spotted by the enemy if they roll up to peek through a hedgerow than my infantry are. The end result is that these units are going to be acting as fire support in the same way I've been using the Shermans, though to comparatively underwhelming effect. The final component of my force is the off-map support, 2 tube sections of 81mm mortars and the 155mm howitzer battery that we had in the last mission. There's no indication that the 155s are going to carry forward from here, so I'm just going to expend all of their ammunition. The objective area is always a likely place to find the enemy, and the farmhouse objective has some awkward areas to it that could cause me issues, specifically this wood, but also the farmhouse itself. So I'm going to call the 155s in on a linear mission between the two, on a maximum light mission with all 3 guns. This translates into about 3 rounds a minute, dropping along the target line until the battery runs out of ammunition. There are a few reasons for using an extended but low intensity bombardment like this. The first is that the longer shells are falling on the enemy positions up there, the longer those enemy positions are likely to be suppressed. The objective is at the top of a slope after all, and despite all the bocage, it's not impossible that my troops could come under fire from positions far in the rear as they move forwards. Secondly, it means that the guns will maintain a steady rate of fire. Trying to dump out a battery's entire stockpile of ammunition as fast as possible translates into overheating barrels and overworked, exhausted gun crews, both of which mean a drop in rounds per minute. Intense barrages have their place, but the light max mission serves my purposes here pretty well. I'm also quite aware that I haven't been using my 81mm mortars as much as I should do in a lot of these missions. This is mostly due to the nature of bocage fighting and the short time span of the missions. My experience so far is that by the time I can bring up a HQ team to order a fire mission and go through the preparation and spotting phases before finally dropping mortars on the target, I've usually been able to solve the problem with whatever means I have on hand. Perhaps I need to start having my HQ elements further forward and being more prepared to start the call for fire process as part of my infantry attack. I can always call it off if I don't need it. Regardless, I want to get more use out of my mortars, so I'm including them in the preparatory fire plan as well. There are a few choices to make when selecting targets for a pre-planned bombardment. In this case, I've chosen to hit a couple of chunks of woodland outside the objective area, both because they seem like likely areas for the enemy to set up, and because I don't like fighting in woods. These are both medium barrages, so medium length, medium intensity. I'm aiming at a balance between saturating the areas with enough mortar bombs to plaster enemy positions and cause casualties, but also without expending so much ammunition or using the mortars for so long that I can't call on them later if I need them. All of this artillery and mortar fire makes a noisy backdrop as my pixel trip set off. We're in familiar territory here. Scout teams out in front, backup on hand, mobile fire support standing by, and engineer teams closely trailing the lead elements so I can blast through any hedgerows in short order. There's no sign of the enemy until about 20 minutes in and we're halfway up the map. This lack of contact has been illuminating in and of itself. The absence of enemy forces is just as useful as actually finding them. The briefing suggestion that the enemy are probably under strength feels borne out by the fairly minimal outgoing fire and the lack of any engine sound contacts like the ones that revealed the two slugs at Labrynth, and this leads me to believe that German armour won't be making an appearance in this battle. Even so, I am feeling the absence of the Shermans. Trying to use the two types of M8 in the same role is reinforcing my opinion of the Humboldt Sherman. Neither the Greyhound nor the HMC are really capable of putting the same amount of fire out of an M4 with its 75mm gun and 3 machine guns. This translates into fire superiority taking longer to build up. That's something of an issue because despite having a force in position to hook around on the right flank by blasting through some bocage on the map edge, not only is there some risk because they wouldn't have a covered position to assume once they were through, it would turn into an open firefight which is less one-sided than I would like, but there is an MG42 set up in the next hedgerow along, a position in depth that refuses to be silenced by the Greyhound I have up front. That's an issue that's going to take some time to get around. The Greyhound is of course the HQ vehicle for one of the recon sections, which means it's able to start calling in a mortar barrage on the MG42's bocage line. This is actually a role I hadn't foreseen for the scout cars, given that they're essentially proof against enemy small arms from the front and are capable of calling for fire using their radios. They're a better choice for directing off-map support than the infantry who could be killed or suppressed by the enemy they're trying to mortar. All of this though translates into my flanking force being unable to flank, meaning my platoon in the next field over will have to turf the enemy out of their hedgerow with a frontal assault. That's riskier, hence the need for a greater degree of fire superiority. It simply takes more time to suppress the enemy for an assault element to close with them from the front than it does to pin them in place for a flanking unit to deliver the killing blow. The time it takes to develop this kind of fire with the Greyhounds, one of the HMCs, and my organic infantry support is long enough for the enemy to drop a mortar barrage on my fire support position. It's not as bad as it looks, but some of the vital engineers are taken out by fragments, and I'm lucky that the survivors are able to acquire their demo charges when they give them buddy aid. Despite this minor setback, the attack goes in and successfully destroys the German troops on the hedgerow, though not without loss. On the right, the mortars come in and do a good job of saturating enemy's sunken lane position. There are a couple of survivors, but these are grenaded by a scout team, and although there are more Germans behind a second bocage line who engage at near point blank range, these are quickly dealt with. Without too much trouble, I have two platoons converging on the objective area. The 155s have done a number on the German defenders up here, and though there is scattered resistance, they've all retreated a little from the hedgerows and my troops are able to move up and finish them off without undue risk. With 2 minutes to go and my troops mopping up what survives they can find in the wood, the enemy surrenders. As usual, this translates into a total victory. The 19 surviving Germans have given up completely. They've lost 35 dead, 23 wounded, and had 1 man taken prisoner. 22 of these casualties were caused by the pre-planned bombardment. It's obvious enough from the moonscape around the farmhouse that the 155s did their job, but it also looks like I correctly guessed the position of one of the enemy platoons with one of the mortar barrages and gave them a good pasting. The rest of the casualties were almost entirely inflicted by my infantry in the end game, mopping up the objective area. The vehicles didn't exactly shine. The Greyhounds scored 3 kills between them, including indirect fire kills from the mortar barrage called in on the right, and the HMCs didn't hit anybody at all. That doesn't mean that they were useless. The enemy force was severely under strength from the start, and hitting a 1 or 2 man target is much more difficult than hitting a whole squad, but the cavalry is feeling pretty underwhelming right now. I've got them in tow for the next mission too, so we'll see how they do there. The forward observer team, who I was after, are out of action in the wood near the farmhouse. One of them was killed by a 155 shell, and the other 2 were unceremoniously mopped up by my infantry. Finally, because we can see all of the unit information now, we can see that they're all from 3rd Company 1058th Infantry Regiment, the same formation that attacked us a couple of missions ago in Turnbull's Stand. So the reason why there aren't that many Germans here is because we dealt with them earlier in the campaign. Overall, this one was very similar to Labrynth in being another application of what I've been doing throughout the campaign, a pretty straightforward mission. I should point out though that despite this one and Labrynth being straightforward, and I'm saying straightforward instead of saying easy because they're not really, It's still taking me right up to the time limit. That's a sign of excellently crafted missions. In the bigger picture, the immediate threat to St Mere Eglise has been removed, and with massive reinforcements pouring ashore on Utah Beach, the American forces are going to be attacking northwest into the Cherbourg Peninsula. We're not even halfway through the campaign yet, guys. There's still a lot more to come. Hope you all enjoyed this one. Don't forget to comment, rate and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.